Let's answer some leftover questions about Sdaccess before moving on. Let's go to the first question here. What is the reference model for fabric design? So this is a guide that Cisco makes available to you so you can design your fabric depending on your needs. So for instance, if you have less than 200 endpoints and less than 40 access points, you can go for fabric in a box design. This is a one tier design. This means that you are going to deploy only one box, and this box will be performing the functions of fabric edge node, control plane node, and border node. And you can also run an embedded wireless LAN controller here, all in one box. That is known as fabric in a box. Remember that you need at least one PSN ICE persona on site, because that box is in charge of performing all the trust sec functions. You might want to have that locally. You still need the rest of your servers existing remotely. For instance, you will need your Catalyst Center servers and the rest of your ICE personas being available remotely. So you will need a wide area network connection in order to reach them. For instance, your DHCP server can also exist there remotely. So that is fabric in a box. You are advised to use Sdaccess technology in order to have some sort of high availability for that box. In that case, if you're using Sdaccess, you will need a physical wireless LAN controller if using Sdaccess. Otherwise, if you're not using Sdaccess, you can run the embedded wireless LAN controller in that box as well. So if you need up to 2,000 endpoints or up to 100 access points, you can go for the very small site. We are going to use a two-tier design here. In one tier, we're going to have our fabric edge nodes. And in another tier, we will have our border nodes and control nodes. So this is a co-located deployment because we are running control node and border node in the same device. We still need one PSN, at least one PSN persona locally. All your remaining servers are found remotely through a wide area network. So if you need up to 10,000 endpoints or 200 access points, you can go for the small site deployment. We still are using a two-tier design, but we are going to have a shared services block now, because this deployment is a little bit larger. You can go for a physical wireless LAN controller now, but you can still use an embedded wireless LAN controller. And you will be having your DHCP servers here now, locally. Because you have more users, your DNS servers also will be installed here in this services block locally. Now, if you need up to 25,000 endpoints or 1,000 access points, you can go for the medium site. In this case, we are going now for a three-tier design. We are going to introduce intermediate nodes because we are going to have more fabric edge nodes, and we want to remove that burden of connecting so many fabric edge nodes into your border nodes. And we are also going to separate the control nodes, and we have the control nodes existing in our shared services block now. And we will need a physical wireless LAN controller. And if you need up to 5,000 endpoints or up to 2,000 access points, you can go for the large site deployment. In this case, we are still using a three-tier design, but we are going to add we can add another block that will serve the guests users in the DMZ zone in our firewalls, and all of our servers will exist in our shared services block. We will have there our Catalyst Center, our ICE, full ICE deployment with all the 4 personas there, our wireless LAN controllers there, our DNS servers, DHCP servers, control per nodes, and so on. So this is a headquarters level design. So let's go for the next question. What's the difference between using route leaking and BRF leaking when talking about the Fusion router? So this is easy, because if you have your shared services block living in a global routing table, that means that your Fusion router is going to interchange routes between BRFs and the global routing table. Global routing table to a BRF, and global routing table interchanging prefixes with a BRF. That is known as route leaking. But if for some reason, for some weird reason, your shared services block lives in a BRF, so you don't have a global routing table here, you have a BRF here, then your Fusion router will have to share prefixes between this shared services block BRF to these BRFs that come from virtual networks within your fabric. And this is known as BRF leaking. So in summary, remember, if you are going to make your Fusion router share routes between a global routing table and BRFs, that is known as route leaking. If you're going to make your Fusion router share routes between BRFs coming from your fabric and your shared services block that lives in a BRF, so that means BRF to BRF, that is known as BRF leaking. Next question. What are the available options to deploy guest access? You have 2 options for the Cisco Sdaccess solution. Guest access as a dedicated virtual network. So you will be creating a virtual network for guests that provides a certain level of security and separation of traffic. And your other option is using a DMZ zone connected to your firewalls, where you will be installing there guest border nodes and guest control nodes. In that sense, your guest users that get connected to your network will get registered into your control node. So the host tracking database that exists in this guest control plane node will only have guest user information. So we are going to have VXLAN tunnels being created between the fabric edge nodes to the guest border nodes for guest traffic. We will also have DHCP servers here that will be only be serving guest users. In order for this to work, you will need to advertise the loopback IP addresses that belong to your border nodes or your control nodes into your fabric. You will need to configure your firewall manually in order for this to work. There is no option to do it automatically with the help of your Catalyst Center. So in this case, you can notice that you are actually separating all of your guest traffic physically with the second option. Whereas in the first option, you are not expending more money or more resources in order to have a guest access within your enterprise network. Next question. How to securely communicate virtual networks with one another. So you might have the need at some point to be able to communicate users or devices that live in one virtual network X to users or devices that live in virtual network Y. For some odd reason, you might want to do that. And the best way to do it is to do it through a firewall. So in this case, and you might create, for instance, some sort of VRF here in your firewall and another VRF here, or some other means of doing it. And so the firewall will be in between, and you will have the opportunity to set up rules that will provide these communications between these two different virtual networks. And this is the most secure way to do it because you have a firewall doing it. So what if I am using a Cisco Firewall and as an upstream BRF aware peer? So I have virtual networks here and I am using a Cisco Firewall here. How do I make this work? So remember that Cisco currently have two lines of firewalls. So Cisco currently supports the old generation of firewalls, which are ASAs, that are evolution of much older firewalls that were Pixes. And Cisco recently acquired a new generation of firewalls from a company that is known as Firepower. So we're going to see how to use these ASAs and Firepower firewalls in order to become an upstream peer for your border nodes. So if you're using ASA, you can create security context. So you can create security context A in your ASA firewall and security context B. So you can land prefixes from one virtual network X into this security context A, and prefixes coming from this virtual network Y into a different security context B within your ASA firewall. Now, another way to do it is that remember that you can create security levels with ASA firewalls. These come from PIX firewalls. PIX firewalls were able to do this. And remember that in ASA firewalls, you can create, for instance, one interface A and give it that interface A a security level, let's say, of 50. These security levels can go up to 100. And you can create, for instance, another interface B and give it a security level of 51. So if you had two virtual networks, for instance, virtual network X and virtual network Y, and you could be able to land prefixes coming from this virtual network X into this security level, and then prefixes coming from this virtual network Y into these security levels, and then you could create rules in order to be able to make these users that are living in these two security levels communicate with each other through firewall rules using or taking advantage of your firewall. Now, if you were using a Cisco Firepower firewall, you could use security zones. So these Firepower firewalls are able to create security zones. So you could create secure zone A and secure zone V. And if you had virtual network X and virtual network Y, you could land prefixes coming from virtual network X into this security zone, and then virtual network Y prefixes could land into security zone V, and then you could create rules in order to communicate devices that live in different security zones. But remember that you are doing that in a firewall, which is a secure device. Um, that's it.